Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the truth about what you can control and what you cannot. Because ultimately, the only way to really live and be authentic and to have inner peace and happiness that's sustainable in our lives is to surrender. To surrender. To surrender to what we cannot control. And in order to understand what that means, we have to understand what is in our power and what is not. Our whole life, we've been looking at the external, right? The external, oh, I'm happy when that happens, and I'm unhappy when that happens, but aren't you then always basing your happiness and how you should feel on something outside of yourself? And can you actually control anything that's outside of yourself? Try and name me something outside of yourself that you can control 100% of the time. Other people, things that happen, events, problems in the world. You can't control any of it, right? None of it. But what you can control, the one thing you can control in this entire existence is yourself. And you may say, oh, that's not true. I can't control my mind. I can't control my feelings. I can't control any of this. How do I have any control over myself? My mind's just going crazy all the time. I'll tell you why your mind's going crazy all the time. It's because you've been living your life putting your focus and your control, your illusion of control, on things outside of yourself. And so that way, your emotions are always being triggered by what happens. If something you perceive as good happens, happiness comes out, and that thing made you happy. Happiness didn't come from you, it came from that thing. And likewise, if something triggers you into anger, then that thing made me angry. That person made me angry. The anger's not inside me. That person made me angry. Yeah, but is that ever really true? Because your emotions, do they ever come from outside of you? No, they don't. They only come from in here. What's in here will come out if you allow the external to trigger that. And so really what you have here is the mind's identity, the mind thinking that it has control over things that are outside of itself, and you, the observer behind the mind, ultimately knows that that's futile. But if you're identified with your mind, you don't recognize that. As long as you're identified with your mind and your thoughts, they are running the show. But when you realize that you can observe your mind, you can observe your thoughts, that means you are the awareness behind that. You're not the thinker. The mind is the thinker. And it has its own identity. And this is what we call the ego. And if your whole life you've been raised to believe that you have to try and control things outside of yourself, you have to try and control other people, you have to try and control situations, you have to try and control the outcome, you can never do any of that. And so when things seem to be going well, it's because things outside of yourself seem to be going well. And when things seem to be going poorly, it's because things outside of yourself seem to be going poorly. But what if there was another perception, another way to view things and to organize things within yourself so that things outside of you no longer have any power over you? And this is where we get to learning what we can control. Because when we realize we're not the mind, that we are an eternal spiritual awareness, a spiritual being who is inhabiting this mind, body, spirit complex, as the law of one puts it. But no, it's your spirit, your soul is who you are. This body is not who you are. It's the temporary experience of who you are. And so when you realize that, suddenly you realize that this negative relationship that you've had with your mind, with your body. I mean, think about how many times we criticize ourselves, we judge ourselves, we have self-image issues, we hate our mind because why do you keep thinking about that? Why do you keep thinking about it? I'm feeling terrible thinking about that and I can't stop thinking about it. It's because your mind is not being controlled by you. And you need to learn that you have that power. And as long as you are in conflict with the mind, and the mind thinks that it has to do everything, it thinks it's running the show, that's where the problem is. The mind wants control, but really it wants to be controlled. And so you have to step up and take accountability for yourself. The only reason you feel the way you do on a consistent basis is because of how you perceive yourself and your place in the world. If you change that, the way you feel will change because you'll start to reprogram your subconscious to understand that you're in charge, the real you, the awareness behind all of this is in charge, right? And that this is a co-creating experience. And if the mind, if the ego can accept that, and it will take a shattering of the ego, a breaking of the ego, and the illusions it believes to be true, the delusions it has, you have to break those, and this is called ego death. Often takes place with another period of time in your life called the dark night of the soul, where you don't know who you are, and everything seems like it's falling apart. But truly, this is the rebirth cycle. This is where the metaphor of the phoenix comes into play. The phoenix dies, burns to ashes, the breaking, the shattering of the ego, until it rises from the ashes in all its glory and anew, a rebirth. And so the ego death is a scary experience because the ego is afraid, the mind is afraid. But in reality, it is just the start of your new self, your true self. And so if you allow yourself to go through this process of breaking the illusions of external control, right? Of you have to let go of all these old expectations that you have had thrust upon you that you accepted, you know, by society, by parents, by teachers, by anyone who ever influenced you, right? And through this process of ego death, in a way, you shed what isn't you. All right. And this is where surrendering becomes so important. Because if you choose to surrender to the flow of life, then life will flow. Because ultimately, how you're feeling on a regular basis is what you're attracting into your life. You attract who you are. You attract what you are. And so if you're a person who lives at the lower vibrational emotions, shame, guilt, fear, doubt, anger, desire, any of these lower vibrational frequencies, you will be attracting more things into your experience that reflect that. And so you keep just fighting against yourself this entire time. But if you can make peace with the mind, if you can let the mind know, I'm in control. I choose what we focus on. I choose how we perceive things. And you are here to process things. You are here to help me in this life experience. You are here, like, we can be best friends. But it takes going through this process to get to that point where you can do that, where you can have a reconciliation, where you can reconcile and forgive and learn to love each other, because that's what it is. It's a relationship. You have a relationship with your mind. You have a relationship with your body. All right. And how your relationship is will determine how your life is. And so if you can find peace inside of yourself, that is where your happiness will come from. Because no longer are you in conflict, no longer are you at war with your mind and with your emotions. Instead, you learned to befriend them, learn to love them, understand that ultimately the subconscious and how it's programmed is a neutral thing. The subconscious is programmed by what you consistently put your focus on. That is always writing your subconscious program. And the strongest programming comes when we are feeling the most emotional. And that's why trauma, when really things that happen that make us feel very bad, very negatively, and we don't know how to process that, and so we suppress those things, they become major issues within our energetic field. And if we don't know how to regulate those things, if we don't know how to heal them, they just keep replaying in a cycle, in a different way, in your mind, through external experiences, some way. Because what your subconscious is really trying to get you to see is that you need to address this. You need to come at it and you need to look at it with a better perspective, a more loving, a more compassionate perspective. Seek that higher understanding, seek that higher perspective, because it will change everything. This thing that happened 20 years ago that just, nags at you over and over and over again. You can't let it go, no matter how traumatic and awful it seems at the surface level. Realize that you're still here. You survived it, right? Now, what can you learn from it? It happened for a reason. What was the reason? What was the lesson behind it? That's what matters. And when you start to look at it from that way, like, wow, even if it's something abusive and just, it's awful, right? It's tragic, and we all hate to see it, and we don't like to, but we need to look at those things and we need to find the truth. And the truth in a lot of those situations is the abuser is in so much pain. They hate themselves. And that manifests as abuse. That manifests as taking it out, because they're always looking outside of themselves for why they feel this way. They don't realize that their emotions are always coming from within. And that's the issue with almost all of us, is we don't have that emotional intelligence to understand that our emotions come from within, and that things that trigger us are bringing out something that's already inside of us. It's not the external thing that's doing it. It may feel like it in the moment, but it's not. That's the illusion. If you have, for example, if, something someone says to another person triggers them, and it brings out anger, and they just react without thinking, and they're just furious now, right? And it ruins their whole day. If that same person says that to me, and I don't have that anger inside me, because I've learned to express my anger in a healthy way, and to, I still have anger sometimes. I mean, it still comes out. It's not like it's just gone. I'm still human, but but through this healing journey, I've let go of so much anger that now whenever someone just does something that used to make me angry, for the most part, I'm like, okay, like, that has nothing to do with me. I know it has nothing to do with me. And, I could sort of just recognize it. And even if it starts to bring up like those old feelings, I'm like, I recognize it, and I breathe and I center myself, and I realize I don't have to get angry at that. That's just old stuff. That's just old programming. I've moved on. I've let it go. I've healed that. And every time that you consciously make that choice, you consciously choose not to let it get to you. And it's easier said than done, and it takes a lot of time. But every time you do that, you're healing. And every time you feel your emotion without creating more of a problem in your mind by feeding it, right? Because what happens when you're feeling bad? You start feeding it negative thoughts. It just grows the negative energy. It pushes that energy more negative, right? And so it gets stronger. It feels stronger. It feels worse. But when we just allow ourselves to feel the emotion without having our minds race, and how do we stop our minds from racing? Start to think purposely. Start to think consciously. Tell yourself loving things when you're not feeling well. Even if the only thing you can get out is, I love myself, I love myself, I love. Like, do that. Because at least then your mind isn't going, oh, I fucking hate this. Oh, this life is awful. That person sucks. Like, oh, like, because that's just feeding the beast, That's just feeding that monster that is living within you, that demon. Instead, realize that you have the conscious power to change that. And that's maybe the most important part of healing, is realizing that feeling the emotions without feeding it is healing. What you can feel, you can heal. I love that saying. It's awesome. Because it's so true. Every time people ask, like, how do you heal all this anger or all this grief? You feel it. In the moment when it happened, that traumatic event happened, you said, I can't handle this right now. And that meant your subconscious had to do something with it. And if you're saying, I can't handle this, I can't let it go, that means by the opposite there, you are holding it in. And so it becomes part of your energetic makeup, your energetic field. And it stays there. It stays there until you choose to let it go, because you're always in charge. You are the creator of your reality. And if you want your reality to be better, to be happier, to be more loving, you have to consciously choose to put your focus on things with a loving perspective. If you keep putting your focus on all these things that are outside of you that you can't control, that make you feel bad, all you're doing is making yourself feel bad. And guess what? The solution to any of those things, it doesn't exist down here. It exists up here. That's where the solution is. The negative perspective is going to be down here with the bad feelings. That's where the problem is, right? That's where you find the problem. And then up here, though, is the solution, because the difference between the problem and the solution is always just a vibrational frequency. The problem exists at a low vibrational frequency, and the solution exists up higher. And so the more neutral you can be is actually better. Be objective, be neutral. Look at things. If you can't get to a positive place with something that's happening in your life, that's repeating a lot, that's happening all the time, just look at it neutrally. Be like, at the very least, I start off by accepting this, right? I accept that it's happening. I accept that it exists. I accept that I'm feeling this way. And from acceptance, then you move to a place of willingness to heal. All right, willingness to face it. And as you keep, I guess maybe willingness comes before acceptance, willingness to accept. Either way, you're willing to accept it, you accept it, and now what do? If you come to a neutral place and you minimize that momentum that the negative perspective has within your energetic field, within your mind, you start to push it more from the negative to neutral to positive. And if you can find the positive perspective, which exists at the higher vibrational feelings of things, that's when you heal that. That's how you heal that. Is you move from a place of fear and doubt and anger and resentment and grief and all this stuff, shame and guilt, and you move to a place of peace, love, understanding, reason, acceptance, joy. And understand that everything that happens that's negative, that's painful, that results in suffering, that is all temporary. And it is only here for our experience. We chose to come here. We chose to experience these things. And we knew that coming in that there was going to be many challenges, but these challenges are for us. They're for us to heal our soul. And when we're healing our soul, that means we're healing stuff that's happened in this life. We're healing stuff that happened in past lives. We're healing stuff that's ancestral, right? And we do this because not only does it make our lives better, but it raises the collective consciousness of the entire planet. It heals your entire family line. It is so selfless to learn to love yourself enough to heal. And when you heal, serving others will just come naturally. Because if you love yourself and you love life and you love others, and there's no resistance there, you're not sitting there sulking, feeling bad about yourself. I mean, think about the happiest times in your life. How easy is it to be nice to someone when you're feeling good? How easy is it to help somebody when you're feeling good? As opposed to when you're feeling bad, how hard is it to help somebody else, to even care about somebody else's problems? It's so difficult when we're just in our own shit and stewing in it, right? So if you can learn to heal, to raise your own vibration, to get to that healthier perspective, to surrender to the external because you can't control it, to just say, I allow what's going to happen, and I know that what's happening is for me, because even when it's something I don't like, what can I learn from it? What changes it, right? What changes it for me? You can't change that it happened. Let that go. What can you learn from it? How can you grow from it? Because when you grow from it, when you learn from it, guess what? It's not going to be happening to you anymore. You're going to grow above it. And there will be new challenges and new things there, but life can just be this progression of getting better and better and better. If you allow it, if you surrender and understand that the only thing you can control is yourself. The control is only within you. You have to learn to love yourself. You have to learn to love your mind. You have to learn to let things go. You have to learn to remain unattached to what's happening around you, unattached to others. We don't need to be possessive and obsessive. We need to be open and loving. True love is liberating. It frees you from the heaviness of life. True love and forgiveness. So when we learn to let that heaviness go, life will just get better. You are light. You're not meant to carry any of that heaviness. It's not for you. You're meant to let everything go. You're meant to learn from your experiences. You're meant to grow and evolve and change. And your life is meant to get better and better as it goes. But when we get stuck in those lower vibrational places, we get stuck in our anger, we get stuck in our grief, we get stuck in our shame. Those are the lives that you see that end up being really sad. You see really, older people who have lived decades being unhappy, being miserable, being stressed, being overwhelmed, not liking themselves, not liking life, not doing the things they wish they could, not following their heart, not following their passions. That's the stuff we're healing. That's the ancestral stuff we're healing. Is all these dreams, all these passions that never got to be experienced. And there's a really beautiful perspective there, if you really think about it. So, surrender to the flow of life and learn to love yourself. Learn to control yourself. Self-mastery is self-love. And it is the next evolutionary stage of the human experience. We're ready for it. It's time. All right. I love you guys. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.